Well, hello YouTube, this is RL coming to you again from my channel, and welcome back to another installment of Retro Life. So once again, I introduced my friend CK, and I'm not going to be calling you a special guest. I think that was a little rude last time, so you are now a co-host.
Fantastic, thank you. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast.
So welcome back to another episode of our new series called Retro Life. In this episode, we're going to be reviewing the classic game called Streets of Rage 2. On the Sega Genesis. We're going to be reviewing on a like, love, and loathe scale, like last time, discussing graphics, music, gameplay, controls, difficulty, and fun factor. So let's get started. So we're going to be reviewing graphics first.
Yes, the classic beat 'em up from 1992 for the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, I think it is, over in Europe.
Yes.
And Japan. So yeah.
It is a classic game, definitely considered the
is.
best beat 'em up on the system, regarded as the best one of the series.
Probably one of the best beat 'em ups to date for gaming consoles, especially all the what we consider retro consoles. Hands down, probably the best.
It's always a bit of a debate on the internet about Streets of Rage 2 and, of course,
Art of Fighting.
Final Fight.
Yes.
Most people are convinced that Streets of Rage is the better game. There are, pros and cons for each. So let's talk about Streets of Rage 2's graphics. So what did you think of the graphics, CK?
It's vibrant. I like the game for two reasons with regards to the graphics. One is the layered playfield, or the layered environment, where you have a foreground, you have the players playing in the XY axis, and then you have the background, or kind of like the buildings and such. And that adds so much depth to the game and makes it visually appealing. It's not just the whole level scrolling by together in one shot, kind of like when we played Contra. Mm-hmm. Everything was pretty much kind of like scrolling in one pane, whereas this game actually has like a dual layer to it. And I noticed that Sega has always been the leader in kind of like layered sprite animation and kind of pseudoing a kind of 2D or 2D, let's say 2.5D, where it's almost 3D type of feel. And then visually, just stunning colors. Characters are super iconic. The bright, vibrant scenes of the neon retro 80s type feel to it is nostalgic. I appreciate a game that has really good colors, really good character designs, and clever level design, which I believe this has, more so than some of the other games I've played.
How would you rank it?
My ranking would definitely be a love. So retro love for graphics for me.
I think the graphics look one of the best looking games on the system. Colors, as you said, look really vibrant. It's very dynamic. It doesn't look flat. It has a nice shading to it, a nice color palette. It's very vibrant compared to some other Genesis games because of the color scheme. A lot of developers didn't know how to use the colors for the Genesis. I think a lot of games where you look at it and the colors just don't pop. I do feel that Streets of Rage 2 definitely pops. The neon, the look of the game is just very beautiful. So I would give this a retro love for sure.
Awesome.
So moving on, how do you like the music, CK?
The music. It is probably some of the best video game music, period. I mean, I have buddies that are massive Streets of Rage fans, and they play this music in their car, on their MP3 players. They don't really care if people are thinking, oh, it's video game music. It's got such an electronic, underground feel to a lot of the music. It's got that kind of neon wave, 90s-ish, late 80s-ish type of jam that invigorates you and makes you want to play. And it gets a retro love from me.
I feel like this might have to adapt this review to say a double love, because the game is, I would say, the best musical game on the system. I mean, all the tracks, I don't think there's one track that I think is bad. It is so well composed. Track called Dreamer. I think it's level 3, I believe. It's just my favorite. It's so great, and I just love to get to that moment. So yeah. I would say this is a retro double love. It's so amazing that I think saying one love is almost insulting to the music of this game.
It is a fantastically composed game, and because it's not just game music, the composer, Koshiro, the music was composed as actual music,
Yes.
and then digitized for the game. So you get properly composed music that is thematic for the game. It is thematic, and it fits the story so well, and it has so many different tones and moods to it. Like you said, when you get to level 3 and you play, it's like, I love being in that moment, playing the game when that track is on. It gives you that energy, it gives you that feeling that you're doing something a lot more than just sitting down and playing a game. You're experiencing this, right? Yeah, I agree. Sega was known to have a technically better sound chip than all the consoles at that time, but it wasn't used to its potential. Right. It really wasn't. I just think that the guys that were developing for the console, outside of Koshiro-san setting up this game, they didn't really use it to its potential. Sound wasn't as important as visual, and visual Sega had in spades.
So let's move on to gameplay. How do you find the gameplay in Streets of Rage 2?
Outside of running around, punching, kicking, and doing a few combos here and there, this game falls into the same space. I'm not downplaying the gameplay by any means. I enjoy, being able to walk around and punch people. One thing that they did different in this, and that I give them credit for, kudos for, with regards to gameplay, is that, levels have a vertical feel as well as a horizontal feel. And that's something that a lot of beat 'em ups didn't have. Being able to go technically down on an angle in the game. If you notice that some sections as you come to the end of the street, you're technically walking south or down on the screen on an angle. And so that made it a little bit better. But to me, it plays like any other standard beat 'em up. I give it a retro like.
The gameplay is kind of repetitive, but it's so fun. What is there to do, really, other than kick and punch people, right? But
that's, right.
That's the beat 'em up era. I mean, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of different combos you could do, and there's that power, kind of like that fire
like the special
ball that comes out of the hands.
Shoryuken?
Yeah, sure.
The uppercut? Shoryuken. Yeah, I think the whole flame on the hand thing was definitely a video game creation of this spiritual energy type thing. And a lot of games do have it. A lot of characters have that kind of spiritual energy ball thing, or
it's definitely a go-to for most beat 'em up fighting games. Yeah, for me, I would give it a retro like. It's a lot of fun. It's not my favorite style of gameplay, but it's definitely a retro like.
Awesome.
So moving on, next on our list is the controls. What do you think of the controls?
Again, we talk about product of its time. The game feels sticky to me when you're moving and you're trying to get your character to advance on the screen. There is no run feature in this, so it feels slow. The tedium of, like you said, just, punching, kneeing, throwing people, jumping and kicking people, it feels sticky and slow. I wouldn't give it a... See, I'm kind of in between. I don't hate it, can't loathe it.
Yeah.
But I don't really like it.
From like to loathe is a big gap.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
So,
totally is a big gap. I give it a retro half-light. I don't mind them, but not having any sharp movements. That's really it. I think that's just the speed of the game, right?
Yeah.
That's how they built it, so...
I find the controls don't have a run in the game, so it does feel a little sluggish. I never had frustration playing it, feeling like, it's too slow, but the game has a pace to it. I guess they want you to play it the pace that they want.
Yes.
You have to wait till all the bad guys are killed before you can move on to the next section. And there's always, the arrow that goes, points to the next. So it's kind of a little bit confining in terms of that gameplay, but that was a time where it was, obviously the processing, they didn't want to rush the system, I suppose. So there's a reason, if they made you run, then you would get to that, maybe trying to finish the level too fast.
That's true, because you have to think that a lot of these games, they're maybe like 40 to 65 minutes total.
Yes.
So you definitely have to pace, as you said. That's a good choice. Choice of words is they paced the game. They could have moved faster and still lock you into having to beat up guys, but then that would add to the pace. So ultimately, yes,
I think that
it was all a controlled format, right?
I think it's like a double-edged sword. It's like if you make the character move too fast in that section where you're in, because it's very confined, you will feel like, let's get on already. You would get people maybe a little bit frustrated that, why am I moving so fast in that section, but I can't get to the next section. So it's a very delicate balance that they would have to do and maneuver.
Yeah.
I think there are games that are a lot more sluggish, a lot slower. For me, it's a retro-like. I never remember playing it saying, why am I moving so slow? I've seen a lot worse, but for me, it's a retro-like. So moving on, we're going to be talking about difficulty.
One, that has adjustable difficulty, and two, even under normal difficulty, it's something that you play to master. I've learned to appreciate the difficulty that they put into this game specifically. The series in general, and for beat 'em ups, it is one of the better ones because of the types of enemies that you have. It's not just one or two or three or four or five. There's easily 15 different styles of enemy attacks. You end up having to think and plan and pace your way through. So difficulty with regards to this, because of the range, I definitely give it a retro love. I enjoy the challenge of being able to try and best my previous score and my time.
I think this game has a great level of difficulty in terms of controlling the difficulties. A lot of games like obviously Contra, other games that are really, really hard. You know, I can think of a few games. There's some games where they're just so difficult, even on easy, you can't even pass the first level. It gets frustrating.
Right.
But this game, I always play it on normal to easy. I'm not great at these beat 'em up games, so I like that, so you could actually enjoy the game, not have to have an overly hard difficulty level so you get frustrated. But this game, I find the difficulty is pitch perfect. If you want it a little easy, you could do it. If you want it a little bit harder, you could do that. You have control and it feels natural, so you don't feel frustrated. So for me, the difficulty on this game would be a retro love because it's so flexible and you could adjust it.
Totally agree.
So moving on to the last category, fun factor. How would you rate this game on fun factor?
The fun factor in this game is through the roof. And when you play two players, or if you had a chance to play this in the arcade with multiplayers, I can't name a time where I felt less than overly excited to play this game with a friend. Even when you're getting your proverbial ass kicked, you know, and you're struggling, and there's tons of guys on the screen, and with this game, it also has friendly fire. So, you know, both of you are trying to mash buttons, both of you are trying to do damage, both of you are trying to hold down the fort. And it is always a fun experience, even when it's frustrating. So, double retro love for me.
Nice, we've got that first double retro love. Then maybe even review some games that have retro loathing.
Oh yes, definitely. I'm waiting for those.
We gotta do that. I think the next one has to be a bad game. It's just to have that, you know, bash that game and not just have loves all the time. People are gonna say, they love everything. For me, the fun factor, it's a very fun game. I think the music plays a factor in that too, because when you're a little bit frustrated, you got that music in the background, it gets you motivated, you know, it's really enjoyable. Obviously, I'm not talking about music at the moment, but the fun factor is through the roof for this particular game. It's just a lot of fun, and you're moving forward and you want to know what's going to be next and where you're going to go next level, next. A lot of clones. I always say they look exactly the same, but that's the era. For me, the fun factor is a retro love. I'm not going to go double love. I think retro love is fair.
Retro love is fair. I agree. Everyone has their levels, and that love is fair. Not to say that I enjoy this game more than you. I just enjoy the game differently than you do.
Yes.
So
it also depends on the kind of games you play. For me, I'm not a beat 'em up fan. This is the one beat 'em up game that I really love. I'm not a fighting guy. I don't play all of them. So Streets of Rage 2, I loved it, but I don't play other games in this genre.
Gotcha.
So still see the beauty and the value and what makes people love this game. So I'm on board, but I still love the game. So that's where I guess we're going to avoid story. There is a story. Do you want to talk briefly about the story and say whether you liked it or not? What do you think?
Yeah, well, the story for the series in general is just a very, mid-80s, 90s action story. There is a crime boss, ex-cop, can't do anything, with the law, so he's got to go above the law. And, he goes out, Axel, our protagonist, in the classic white tee and jeans, goes out in the streets and, deals with criminals with his bare fists. That's pretty standard with regards to stories. This one obviously has a lot more depth than, let's say, something like Contra or something like Sunset Riders, for instance. Or it definitely has a base in which you're playing the game. So you can put yourself in that position and you can see the game develop through that story, especially with it developing over the 3 games in the series. So story's interesting, story's fun, and that's a retro light. I don't love it. It is pretty standard. Not to say that I didn't like hokey 80s, cop movies or action films back then. They have a place in their time. Like you said, they're a product of their time, and I love them for what they are, but they don't really hold up to deeper things back in the day. So for a video game, it's a retro-like for me.
There's no audio, so there's a lot of text. It has more story than most Genesis games from that era, other than RPGs, obviously. So this one is, minimal, but more story than average. I would say it's a retro half-like for me. How about that? Any game that it's mostly just reading and there's no real cutscenes per se, I'm not going to be invested in it as engaging. If that's just me. So it's a half-like for me. So that's our review on Streets of Rage 2. Thanks for co-hosting this podcast with me, CK.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me again.
Yes, always a pleasure. I love this series. We're going to be doing a lot more reviews.
I'd like to play a questionable quality game, and there are a lot for this retro generation. So
yes, mix it up.
I'll be interested to see what you bring to the table.
But it's good to do some obscure games as well.
Definitely.
Maybe like Back to the Future, because those games on the Genesis and NES were terrible.
How about Faxanadu for NES?
I don't know. I never heard of it. So
thanks again, RL, for having me on, and I look forward to many more games.
And I will have more videos in the weeks, months, and years to come. Bye for now.
See you guys later.